But before I do that, I would like to explain the software itself and how things are organized in here. In this area here, this is the tree view. We also can see here there's going to be a curve editor. At this point, it's ghosted. I also have here the canvas. This is where the tracking is going to take place. Down here, I have the area where I can set up my project, and I also can pick up my nodes that I need to work with. So before we start, we need to set up a project. So in PFTrack, once you set up a root folder in a project, PFTrack will automatically save over and over again in that specific project, and you'll see that there is no save button. So in order to create a project, once you open up PFTrack for the first time, you have to click on Create. You need to give it a certain name. I'm going to call it DT for Digital Tutors. And it's asking you to set up the path for it. So I'm going to set up in this specific folder. So I have my green screen in here. I'm going to choose. And once you do that, you're going to have to click on Confirm. And notice that here the screen have changed, and you also have a split screen in here. This is your bin to put footage, and here you have a browser. So I'm going to go to my desktop, and of course I'm working on a Mac. There it is. And I click and drag. I can drag it over here to the bin, but I can also go ahead and drag it over here. Now notice that the computer thinks that this is squeezed VistaVision. Now every time you have a node in here, automatically you're going to have its properties and tools inside. So in order to fix this, I can go either to here, or I can also click in here to the media administration and change it from squeeze VistaVision to custom, and change my pixel aspect ratio to 1 there. The most important button that you might have is right here. This is your cache. Very similar to what we had in MatchMover. I click on it, and it's caching it into the memory of the computer. You can set up the memory of the computer in PFTrack based on your hardware capabilities, but as soon as this is done, I'll show you where exactly you can do that. It's almost there. It's still caching my footage. And if you would like to change the amount of memory that is for the cache memory, you can click on this little gear here, and you can see how much space you can allow your computer to have for the caching memory. But I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to go back to my tree view. Clicking back on this, I'm back on my tree view, and because I cached it, I have the ability to play it with no delays. I need to track this, and I can use manual trackers, very similar to what we did in MatchMover. I'm going here to this button, Create, and I'm making sure that my read-in node is highlighted, and I'm going to click on User Track. And in User Track, I have all the possibilities to create as many manual trackers that I need. So I'm going to click on Create, and as soon as I put the mouse on the footage, I get my little cursor that will allow me to put a tracker wherever I need it to be. So in order to put a track, you have to click, and notice that at the bottom of the screen, you get a little magnifying box. When I move the mouse with the magnifying box, I can see exactly where I can put it. If it's hard for you to see where exactly you need to put your cursor, there's two options. You either go to your magnifying glass, grab the footage around the heart of the tracker and just move it where you want it to be, or you can just zoom in by holding the middle mouse button, just zoom into that footage. And in order to focus on it, it's right mouse button on the footage and pan on it. So I'm moving around. So to zoom, it's the middle mouse button, and I'm moving the mouse up and down. And to pan, I'm clicking on the right mouse button key and move it left and right, or up and down. I'm at the end of the footage, so I need to click on this button here, which is track backwards. Notice here that you have a search mode for best accuracy or best speed if your computer is slow and you don't want to make it even slower. Deformation, where exactly it's going, rotation, scale, or skew. Rotation would be if you have a camera that rotates. Scale if a feature is going in and out in the footage and it looks like it's scaling. And skew if, of course, you have any kind of skew movement. But at this point, I can just leave it out. Failure threshold 0.7. If your tracker has hard time fixing itself to the feature, you can basically lower this number. Because I'm at the end of the footage, I'm going to click on this button, which is track backwards. And you'll notice that it's following that feature. In order to create another track, I'm going to click on Create again. And notice that unlike MatchMover, this software doesn't have tracking forward, tracking backwards, or bidirectional tracking. So I'm going to put another tracker here, but the rules are still the same. I'm going to grab it over here, which means I have to have at least 8 trackers, and they have to define the foreground, the middle ground, and the background. Very nice. And I can create another tracker right over here. This is going to be that side of the wall. So now you can see the amount of trackers that I put. I put about 13 trackers that define the background, the middle ground, and the foreground. And after I have those trackers, what I need to do is to tell the software to solve the camera. So I'm going back to my create, and I'm looking for the node that is camera solver. There it is. And it has a few features. First of all, I would like my camera animation to be as smooth as possible. So I'm going to go here to the camera 01 and say that the translation is going to be high smooth, and go to the rotation and have high smooth. And the next thing I need to do is basically solve the camera based on the 2D information that I have here. So I'm going to click here on this button to solve all, and there it is, refining the solution. And this is what I get. How do I know exactly if this solution is accurate? Where is my 3D space? So I need to go here to the side of the screen and click on either the 2 vertical split screen or the 2 horizontal split screen. And there it is here, my 3D space. This is what I see through the camera. This is my 3D space. Now I can zoom out by the same buttons that I've seen before. It's middle mouse button and move the mouse. This is panning around, and in order to rotate, I'm using the left mouse button key. So you can see I have a point cloud. These are my 3D trackers. Here they are. I got these 2 that define the box that the actor sits on. I have these that define the poles in the background. And of course, I got the wall as well. Very similar to what happened with Match Mover. I also need to define what is the origin of the scene, what would be the scale of the scene, and how it's going to be oriented. So in order to do that, I need to go to my Create, and there is an Orient Scene node. The Orient Scene node will give me the list of trackers that I have in the scene, and I can also, let me just move this back a little bit over here, and I can also choose with the marquee tool the tracker that I want from the footage. So for example, this is a good contact on the ground level, so I'm gonna click, drag, and select this guy, and right here at the parameters say set as origin. So my entire group with the point cloud snapped to that specific tracker. Now I can deselect the marquee tool, and then in the orientation under the edit mode, I can go to rotate and rotate the group. Notice that the group rotates alongside with my point cloud, and try to get the right perspective right about there. This is about eye level. This line here, this is my background or my horizontal line, and I can say that this is pretty good with the eye level of the viewer. And also here I can see that the Y, the X, and the Z pretty much comply with this box. If I want my scene to be bigger, I can click on this, select scale, and scale this up or down if needed. It all depends on the size of my scene. I think this is pretty good right there. And I'm just going to make sure that it stays true to what I did so far. It looks pretty good to me. After I'm done with editing my orientation, I can click on the edit mode and slip it back to none. After the orient scene, what I need is to export this. So I'm going to click on create and look for the export. There's the export, and automatically it's set up to Maya, but you got all kinds of formats in here. For example, you have Autodesk FBX or on OBJ files if you need, Shake, Nuke Python scripts, but I'm going to keep it on Maya ASCII, and I'm going to click on export scene. I'm making sure that it exports the camera and also making sure it exports all of my trackers. So I'm going to click on export scene. No such file directory. I need to see what's going on in here. Oh yes, it's not set up to the right path, so I need to repipe it to the right area. Change it to green _ PFT for PF track. Save and click on export scene. Export succeeded. Wonderful. And I can go and show this file in Maya. So I went ahead and opened up the file that I exported from PF track into Maya. And as you can see here, I have my camera with all its animation, and I also have my trackers. And if I go to the outliner window, outliner, I can see that automatically PF track exported the camera already attached to the grouped trackers, which means they are all grouped together. So from now, it's the same process that I showed in the set fitting videos. So if I go to the camera, go to the attributes, change my near clip and far clip, as I've shown before, I can go to my fit resolution gate, click on horizontal, go to my image plane, make sure I'm seeing the image plane only through the camera. And because the sequence is only a JPEG sequence, I don't need the alpha channel, so I'm going to click on RGB. scrolling down here to the depth and change this to 50,000. And at this point, I'm going to open up the camera itself, click on the film gate button. I can get rid of my grid as well. And here is the scene as it was exported from PFTrack. Now I can start building the proxy geometry. And just to make sure that my camera doesn't go anywhere, loses its animation, I can highlight it, select all the channels that I have here, right click, say lock selected. I notice that also my focal length is animated even though it's just a constant number, but why take any risk? Right click, lock selected. And at this point I can start putting geometry. I need to put geometry that is going to represent this room, this green screen room as it was in real life. And I can start off with this left middle ground apple boxes. I can use just one single polygon cube to represent this. And once I get the perspective right on this one, then I can continue forward and build up the rest of the scene. So I'm going to change back to the quad view. I'm going to change to the perspective. There's my scene here. As you can see, if I look at the top again, it should represent the room. It means that my 3D solution was accurate. And I'm going here to the polygons, and I'm going to call a cube. Now I'm going to guesstimate what is going to be the size of this cube. And if I look here through the camera, I can see it's right here. It's kind of hard to see the cube. So very similar to what I did with the grouped camera, I'm going to create, while this cube is selected, I'm going to create a display layer right here, double click. I'm going to call this proxy geo. I'm going to choose maybe yellow. That'll be nice. See, I can see it now. Very good. So this group and this geometry, I need to make them fit in a way that this geometry is going to stick to whatever I see here in my scene. So I'm taking a look back at my footage, and I see that the cube's corner is actually matching with the tracker that I have right here. So in order to do that and achieve that, I'm going to take my entire group and move it. And notice that I'm moving the entire group on all its components, holding V on the keyboard to the snap mode and snap it to that corner. And I can take the cube and change its pivot point to the same area, very similar to what we did with the still image. So D on the keyboard, V to operate the snap mode, and right there. So if I need to do any changes, it'll be very easy to do it around that specific corner. I'm going to select the group, and I'm going to keep my eyes peeled on the camera, on the viewfinder here, but the rotation is going to be done through the perspective. It's going to be easier. Selecting the group, and I'm rotating it. And I'm trying to match the same perspective that I have on what I see in screen. Now I see that the cube that I've created is really big. So I can grab the cube and just shrink it down until I get the right perspective. Now let me just double check here, and I can scale the cube again. I think the cube is too big right there. Yeah, that looks about right. I can scale it down just a tad. And if I did it right, then these trackers are supposed to be right at the top corner and the front of the cube. That looks okay to me. So that means that the perspective is probably matching. But I've done it on the first frame. And I don't know if while I play this, if it's going to slide. This is one of the most tedious problems that we might have, is where you think you get it right on the first frame, but it's actually sliding while the animation occurs. The cube sticks, but it's not what I thought it is in its size. I can change through the perspective. These apple boxes in real life, they're really narrow, and that seems about right. Let me just play this again to make sure that it's accurate. Looks good to me. That means that our perspective is matching. Now I can create the entire room if I want. I'm going to create the box that my actor sits on, and I'm also going to create the walls. I can have the middle ground, and I can also have the foreground and the background. In order to create the box in front, I have, as a guideline, I have these trackers right here that are sitting on the front of the box. Now, the box that he's sitting on is pretty much mangled. It's old, it's broken, it's not exactly having its 90 degrees anymore, but I can still try to create that proxy geometry for the box. While I do that, I would like to mention that set fitting is probably one of the most hard things to achieve while you're working on a match move shot, and that is because a few factors. Sometimes there is a problem with lens distortion that we're going to talk about later on in the course. Sometimes you have some movement in the trackers that translate to the camera, and then it's being translated as noise and your proxy geometry doesn't fit. There are many things that can go wrong. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying, let me take a look here at the side view. I'm making sure that my box is sitting right on these trackers. As we can see here, the pillar is right on these trackers in the middle ground trackers, and it's time to start resizing this box. Let's see, maybe I need to push it a little bit forward. Right there. And I can, in the same manner that I changed my pivot point of the pillar down here, I can do the same thing with the box. D on the keyboard, V for the snap mode. Change this over here. I can take this and move this towards the box. I think I might have some lens distortion on the box, which happens, but that's okay for now. And I'm going to start resizing the box, make sure that my box fits with the box that my actor sits on. Definitely lens distortion that I did not see on the box. But also this box is kind of old. I know, I was there while we filmed it. And let's see if now box sticks to it. Okay, so the box has some issues, and it looks like it's sliding on the box that he sits on. This is going to need to be fixed. Yeah, I see the problem here. It needs to be pushed back a bit. There we go. Let me see here the edges. Very nice. See, this edge sits right. This edge seems to be right. But I'm towards the end of the sequence, so I'm just going to play this and see where it is standing. Okay, this box needs to be elongated a bit, just a bit on the top, and it needs to be elongated like that. Now let me make sure that it is sitting properly. Yeah, that's about right. And the last thing I'm going to do these walls. This room was constructed with rounded corners, as weird as it sounds, so there wouldn't be any harsh shadows and crease lines in the green screen. For the walls, I pretty much need to have a regular plane, and I'm going to rotate it on the Z -90 and on the X 90. And I can take this right here and make sure it can rotate this now so it sits parallel to these trackers that I have right there. Once I got the pillar and its geometry in the right area and in the right angle, it is okay for me to create something like this. And this wall, I can duplicate it, Command D or Control D. It all depends if you have a Mac or a PC. And I can rotate this guy and move it to here. Just make sure that I got it right on the tracker. I need to rotate it in order for it to sit properly on those trackers. Right over here. And look at this. My walls actually create almost a 90-degree angle. That's good. So there it is. This is the set fitting. Now this is a very simple scene because I don't have much of geometry going on in the scene. In order to check this scene, I'm going to need to apply a checker tester, render it out without the image plane, and take it into After Effects for the ultimate test to see that it's actually playing here, all parts of the proxy geometry highlighted. And I'm going to Window, and I'm going to my rendering editors and to the Hypershade. And I already have here a regular Lambert with a simple checker 2D texture applied to its color. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight my proxy geometry, right click and say assign material to selection. And notice that I right click on the material itself in the Hypershade window, and there it is. I don't need the Hypershade window anymore. And I need to render out the whole animation of the camera. Before I render, I have to do a few things. I have to click on my render setting window. Let me bring it over here. And of course, I can set up my render as part of a render layer. Under my software, I'm making sure I have production quality. I don't need something fancy like V-Ray or Mental Ray. My software will do. I'm going here to the Common tab. I'm making sure that my format can carry an alpha channel, such as a Targa. Making sure I'm giving a name to my renders. It's going to be name and then serial number and extension. Frame padding should be 4 in order to have a sequence that runs from 1 to 120. Down here in the frame range, I'm making sure that the start frame and the end frame cover my entire timeline from 1 to 120. And in the renderable cameras, I'm making sure that is my RealViz camera 1 with an alpha channel enabled. And it should take after the size of the frame automatically. So under the render, I'm going to select the batch render, and I'm going to bring it to After Effects. So the last step would be to open up After Effects or Nuke, whatever you like to use for compositing. Here, I have to go to File. I'm going to import the green screen footage, and automatically I'm going to click, drag it into a composition button, and I'm going to import also what I've rendered out right here, my checker test. Make sure that before you render it out from Maya to turn off the image plane, because otherwise you'll not have any kind of alpha channel in your TGA, so you have to turn off the image plane before you render out the CG. Okay, but because I have alpha, at this point it doesn't matter if it's straight or pre-multiplied. I'm going to put it on pre-multiplied, and I'm going to put it right on top of my green screen. Now, in order to see if it really is matching, I'm going to open up my transform and change the opacity to about 30%. In this case, maybe even 40%. It's too bright. And I'm going to play this. If the set fitting process was inaccurate, I would see sliding between these checker tests and the surroundings. For example, these post-it notes would start to slide, or the box would slide, or even this pillar would slide. Any kind of an error that I would get, that means that my set fitting was not accurate, or if my set fitting was accurate, then maybe something in the camera didn't solve properly. After the simple match moving was done, I can take it into the model from the modeling department and make sure that my proxy geometry helps me to set up this camera into the real scene.